Most of you should recognise this song. It's the sound of 90 vocal tracks sung by a barbarian choir as a recreation of the Elder Scrolls theme made specifically for Skyrim, simply named Dragonborn. With roughly 25 million copies of Skyrim sold, it's safe to say that this song has been heard by a large sum of gamers. To say it's iconic is an understatement. However, the Elder Scrolls franchise not only has this one track, but has an abundance of brilliant scores and sound effects that bring the world of Nirn to life. Creating a beloved video game, or really any fictional piece that both pleases fans and critics alike, is certainly a difficult task, and requires enthralling story elements, well-developed characters, and of course, a strong creative direction for what the world it is set in will be like. Something that is crucial for connecting all of these elements together for modern media would be sound design, whether it be in a grand score or simply using an abyss of silence. Much like movies, video games can evoke true emotion to the player through sound. Certain games do this much better than others, for example, The Last of Us. However, that game is a completely different story, being a truly emotional rollercoaster, which is not quite what I'm going to be discussing today. Although games like that can immerse you through sound, along with other components, and they can often do it really well, I'm going to try and tear away from the comparison of video games to movies, because, unlike movies, video games have a lot of variables. Heavily narrative-based games that are fairly linear tend to work in a similar way to movies within their set pieces and how the sound can be designed. For open-world sandboxes, anything can happen. This is where Jeremy Soul's work on the Elder Scrolls comes into play. He is the man who wrote the majority of the music behind arguably the most popular and expansive RPG series video games have ever seen. It's not only that, but the way he and games director Todd Howard and others worked together to craft a score that flowed with the world around the player. This is how you create a definitively good soundtrack for a game, or at least a game that has so many adaptable circumstances like the Elder Scrolls. When modern video game developers are imagining how their game will turn out, they also have to think about what the player will hear and how the world should sound. They firstly want you to purchase their product, but as artists, they want you to truly invest in the universe that they and their colleagues have spent thousands of hours tirelessly creating. The main goal that a soundtrack should have is obviously dependent on the theme of the game. This is why in games such as Grand Theft Auto 5 that you hear a varied amount of radios whilst in your car, because that subtly pushes the player more into the world of Los Santos. For fantasy games, usually an epic score is developed. To the layman, any old orchestral piece could work whilst you're chomping down on your pizza, slaying trolls and bandits. But that's just laziness. No, not of you. You keep eating your pizza, you've earned it, but the creators, they are the ones being lazy. As I mentioned before, games can change in an instant, in an unscripted manner. Picture this, you're tearing through hordes of enemies, winning to the tune of an epic or heroic track, which would obviously make you feel amazing and like you're on top of the world. You're an unstoppable force, and then boom, the tables turn. You take a poison arrow to the chest, draining away your health. Now, the enemy's hits really do hurt. What do you hear? That same epic score. It doesn't make any sense, right? Many fantasy games have chosen this lazy route, expecting it to pass. And while it is passable, it's really not good sound design. Ideally, a fully adaptable score would be put in place, changing tone as you walk, run, jump, fight, when you're winning, or even when you're losing. But sadly, it's such a difficult thing to implement. It's yet to make a true debut in a well-made game. However, the next best thing is a strong, neutral tone. That's how Soul has dealt with the Elder Scrolls OST. Each track has its own theme and purpose, but isn't too in favour of being too positive or negative, with the exceptions of certain tracks during some seriously scripted moments. The battle themes created for Skyrim have a sprinkle of epicness to get you riled up and ready to fight, but not too much that you'll go in overconfident. They seem to give the player a feeling that not many battle tracks can, a feeling that your opponent may actually be a worthy one. And sure, in the likes of Skyrim, you're essentially a walking tank in all bar the highest sets of difficulties that can take a serious pounding, but the world of Skyrim was meant to be a harsh Northland, much less civilized than the sweeping plains of Cyrodiil. If you feel completely welcomed and are 100% comfortable in the province all of the time, something is wrong. Not only that, but the soundtrack holds a mythic feel to it. It reels you in, immerses you, but there's always a dreamlike feel to it. This is especially prevalent in The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, through most of the soundtrack. Obviously, we all know we're playing a video game, but our minds can be tricked into sinking deep into the world that we're entering. The Fantasia integration of many of the tracks heard in the Elder Scrolls games adds a sort of dreamlike element, which can help our mind relax during moments of exploration, and just let the player take in the landscape. The way the explore and battle themes were developed may seem fairly obvious in their intentions, but they are in fact beautiful pieces in a very complex puzzle that is the overall game and the experiences it can provide. Ultimately, the game still sounds authentic in its medieval roots. Not only does the score provide that medieval fantasy feel, but the diegetic sounds that you experience complements the world around it almost perfectly as well. When you enter a tavern, you can stumble across some regulars gossiping away whilst enjoying a lute player. Wandering through a city, you'll hear chatter amongst the marketplace, sellers trying to bargain with potential customers, blacksmiths grafting away at their anvil, and guards grunting, being miserable whilst on duty. When you're wandering through the countryside, you'll hear the trees blowing in the wind, wildlife prancing through the shrubs, and waterfalls crashing onto the rocks below. It may seem basic, but these little things, done correctly, build up the world to something truly amazing. These little sounds here and there help glue the universe together, and make the player more accepting of it, allowing an almost full immersion to take place. If you have full surround sound speakers or really good quality headphones, you'll appreciate how sound can in fact make or break a game. Just take a listen.
Make love like a saber cat, or crush your enemies to dust like a giant. Only a mere 20 gold coins, and all this could be yours.
Protect yourself right. Buy armor from Relic.
The true reason the Elder Scrolls games work at being so entertaining and immersive is how all of the components weave together. Not just with the sound effects working with the dialogue, and then on a higher level with the score, but how all of the sound correlates with what we see on the screen, what we feel from the myth that we're experiencing, the stories that we witness.